Game on.
Get over here!
Hi everybody, thank you for joining me on today's edition of Glen's Retro Show. Now at Walmart they sell these arcade classics from BasicFun, and I have all of them. Sometimes I have multiple copies of them as well. I keep some stock, I keep some in the box, some I've converted to a Raspberry Pi, and recently I did a review of the Mortal Kombat one that they came out with. It's number 15. And this is basically the Sega Genesis version of Mortal Kombat, and this little guy right here. Now, it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I kind of like that they went to try and do something like this. Got a nice 6-button joystick and buttons on there. And the Sega port did have a blood code. Now, when you turn this little guy on, you do see the screen asking you to enter the blood code. But the blood code's been removed from the ROM. There's no way to put it on here. There's even a test mode which could try and get the blood in, but it's simply not there. They removed the blood from the game. Now I kind of understand that they're going, for little kids on here, not really for people my age, but it's just a fact that people my age are guys who remember this game and want to go out and buy it. So the more and more I played it, the missing the blood wasn't the worst part of it. Sega Genesis emulation sound, whether it be from At Games or apparently from BasicFun here, they're just horrible. I mean, the sound is so bad, you don't want to play the game because it's just bad sound, and the sound effects are just not good. Now the screen on here is pretty good, running off of the batteries is good. Now personally, I always prefer the Sega Genesis version less than on the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo had more colors, better resolution, and had more sound, even the people screaming effects, which is all kind of missing in this ROM right here. So initially I kind of liked it, but then the more I started playing it, the more I realized I really didn't like it. So what I did was I decided to convert this guy to a Raspberry Pi 3, and that's what this episode is going to be about. Not really so much a step-by-step guide. I've already done that, and the steps are basically the same, but I'll kind of show you how I converted this little guy here from basically the poor emulation that was on here, and I really wish manufacturers would realize, I know this is only 20 bucks, it's not like spending $100 on a console, but just put a little effort into it. If you're going to release something where the visuals are really bad or the sound is really bad, it's just going to end up being ultimately a bad review of something that could have been pretty neat and sold well. But when you have something that just sounds bad or looks bad, well, I guess you can turn them to Raspberry Pis and make them perfect, which we're going to talk about here today on Glen's Retro Show. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, before we actually get into the video, a couple things I want to just make a note of. Whenever I work on anything, when I try to mod it from the manufacturer, two things I try and always do. One, I try and keep the device looking as stock as possible. I try not to make too many changes to it. So if you looked at this versus the one you bought from BasicFun, you would look at them and not really know which is which. That's the first thing I always try to do if I can. The other is I always try and use as many parts over as I can. Obviously I had to buy a Raspberry Pi 3 and a screen, but wires, batteries, charging circuits, connectors, plugs, all those I try and salvage from old machines that I have lying around if I can. Those are the two things I always try and do when I build these things. So now let's take a look at this before I even turn it on, just on the console itself, how it is, and then we'll get into how I made it.
Come here!
And I will say, there we go, see a little bit better. The sound in typical emulation of a Sega Genesis is not good at all. I mean, it's playing it, but it just doesn't sound very good. Volume is off, low, and then high. And I am playing this again through a viewfinder, so
Flawless victory.
okay, so this is the Mortal Kombat game you're going to get from Walmart for about 20 bucks. And it's fairly easy to get into. On the back here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 screw holes. It's just a regular Phillips head screwdriver. You also want to open this up right here, and there should be 3 AA batteries you just want to take out. When you open it up, you basically have a Sega Genesis on a chip on here, some flash memory on here. Now there is a, I guess a no ohm resistor here that normally pop these off to find other games on here. There are no other games on here. This is just Mortal Kombat. Here's your reset button, your screen. If you figured out how to interface with this screen, I guess you could use it again, but it's really not worth it. The screens are not that expensive. What we will be doing though is removing these here. These are for your controllers down here, and you have your secondary board, which is your on-off and your volume control. So the only thing really getting tossed is this section right here, which is the main brains of it, but it's really not very good. I mean, it's okay, but for me that sound is just too bad to keep. So the easiest thing to do here is your joy board down here. Honestly, it's really easy to take a pair of scissors and just cut down here, and then we can just desolder and pull these wires right out. This is really not going to be used anymore at all. You could save it, I suppose, run 5 volts, actually not 5 volts, probably, yeah, about 5 volts to it and have it running in something else, but it's really not worth it. So again, we're just going to snip this guy right off, and we'll desolder the joystick from the main board. Now here we're just doing a quick test fitting, and the Raspberry Pi 3 and the 3.5-inch HDMI screen pretty much are exact fit. There's pretty much no wiggle room, which is good, so it sits nice and steady. A little hot glue in these spots hold it in place. Now what I did do was I took a small felt tip marker pen and just traced around the SD card here, so I knew where to drill some holes and use a file to clean up and make this hole here. Technically, I mean, if you give a gap here, you don't have to do that, but I assume you may want to take your SD card out at some point. And if you don't do this now, you're going to have to unglue the whole thing and pop the machine out. Now, I only glued the screen down, so technically I guess you could always pop the Pi 3 off of there fairly easy. But it's just a hassle to open this thing up, take out the screws, where you can simply make a small hole now and gain access to that SD card whenever you want. Now in the back here, the Raspberry Pi 3, because of the way it sits in here on the display, you do have to make a small cut on the back panel here to make it fit, otherwise it won't close. And I just take these out here. This was the battery area. You don't have to. I did just because I'm actually going to file these down, make them smooth, and probably paint it. But you technically do not have to take those out. So you see on the inside here, this is the screw holder for the battery cover. That had to be cut down pretty much to where there's a little metal in here for the screw. You pretty much got to cut it all the way down to there again, or the Pi won't fit. And just make sure everything else here is cut to that same level. This here actually is pretty helpful. This will actually sit in the bottom of the Pi, holding it up. So it doesn't really need to because you're gluing it in place, but it's just good when you're moving it around. This little shelf here will hold it in place fairly well. And I did have to snip off. You see they're down here. This is where the unit was locked into the cardboard box. These have to be snipped off because they're too tall and they're going to hit the back of the Raspberry Pi 3. So you have to take them off as well. Now as far as the controller goes, it's almost perfect for this type of thing. There's a couple things we need to talk about, but everything here is marked, which is great. So when you cut the cable off, just touch it with a soldering iron, and you can basically pull out the wires easy enough. Now you have to be careful. I had the soldering iron solder wick on here a little too hot, and it started to, as you can see here, it actually started to pull the traces up. Nothing got broke. Get a little bigger here. See, the traces started to bubble up, so I just put a piece of Kapton tape on here to hold it down. Didn't ruin anything, but it was a bit of a hassle because see, they're all marked here. Now, the one thing to note is that over here there are 2 block buttons and the start button. Well, basically they're all the same thing. You can hit this for start, this for start, this for start, this for block, this for block, this for block, because they're all the exact same button. So what I ended up doing is I had to go over here and cut the trace, and I had to cut the trace down here as well. So the start button works just fine as it is because the whole back plane is already grounded. So you just attach these wires, these will work just fine. You attach your wires, these guys here will work just fine. You touch the wires, this guy will work just fine, but so would these guys too. So I had to basically take an X-Acto knife, cut through here, and then I simply took the same X-Acto knife and very carefully stripped off the coating to expose the copper. You can see in here there's a black line, copper, and a black line. So I just scraped in here very, very softly, then put down a little bit of flux and tinned it with some solder. And then I put a wire here. So this wire is now for this button, button number 5. And I used some hot glue and again some Kapton tape to hold the cable down. This one was a little more of a hassle, but to be honest, it doesn't interfere with the button at all. I had to do the same thing here. I had to basically splice the copper like I did here, expose it, put a wire on, so now I have 6 functioning buttons. Otherwise, you'd have 4 buttons and 1, 2, 3 are linked. So you have to do this if you want all 6 buttons to work. It's not that big a deal, just take your time. Here's just another shot of it here. You can see that this is the start button, up, down, left, right. So this start button is for here, but that same trace hits this button and this button. So you need to cut the wire. You can see here a lot better that I simply took an X-Acto knife and I cut it. I at one point had tinned it here, not realizing I didn't need to do it. This button is already grounded, so it's just the start button. This button will work when you put a wire in here. But I spliced here, and then very carefully in this area, just took an X-Acto knife and scraped the green coating off, and then put some flux down, a little drop of solder, and attach this wire, some Kapton tape and hot glue to hold it in place. Same thing under here. You'll see. I think I have a picture of it later in here to see this one. But if you want all 6 buttons to work, that is something you are going to have to do. I do wish they would have simply put them all here, but it's so much easier. They should make all these machines Pi ready. They should. They would sell a lot more, in my opinion. So here is the screen. This is a 3.5-inch HDMI display that I got off eBay. It was about $30. You can see I marked it here in black. This is all that's actually going to show through the screen unless you make it larger on the plastic. But to be honest, all these games are 4.3 aspect ratio. So it's actually not bad. This part of the screen is kind of wasted, but it's what I had available. I could have used a 2.8-inch screen, which would have probably been full, but then you would have probably gotten some black borders on the game. Now those black borders are close to the side, and the screen actually looks a little bit better. So I had no problem using that. And you can see here, it's a quick test feeding. Here's the screen. You see the screen itself fits in here perfectly. And you can see when these wires, I soldered them on, but I used quick connects on the other side to put on the GPIO pins. So I can always move this Pi if I wanted to. You can solder things on directly. I've done that definitely before, but didn't want to do it this time. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit on this part right over here. Let me scroll over a little bit and grab it over. There we go. As far as I can get it. I have to make it a little bit smaller. Let's see if I get it over here. So the screen itself, actually I can't do it because I'm not going to see it on the whole display. I have to go back a little bit more. Gotta go more. Guess I gotta leave it like this for now. But you can see right here is where I cut the hole for the SD card. And the screen itself, this is a 3.5-inch screen. And you can see it perfectly fits inside here and it locks in pretty good. Just a couple drops of hot glue. Hold it in place. There is a power jack here, but it's not needed because it draws power from these pins right here, these GPIO pins. Now this would be your video pins, but I'm not using it over the GPIO pins. There is a U connector here for the HDMI. So this will plug into here, and then it'll plug in down here on the Pi. And let's just see if I can zoom in just to see the model number of the screen. It's a Raspberry Pi display, 3.5-inch. Now, of course, it's not a true HDMI display, but it simply allows it to go over the HDMI connector. And it is a sharp picture, but the resolution is definitely not there. It's still like a 300 by 400 display. And here's just a closer shot. Displays in here, test fitting.
and you can see the Pi sitting here again perfectly. And there's a big gap here. What I ended up doing was I pushed this over as far as I could, just so the SD card would fit through the hole as far as it could go. And you can see the wires, how they fit in here. I probably could have put them in better without the twist, but I already put them in, so it's not a huge deal to me. They're in there and they're functioning. And here's just another shot of the joystick controllers here. Again, they're all marked, so that makes it easy to work on. You got your ground, your Z, your X, your C, your A, your right, left, up, down, and start. Again, the only thing you have to really tap into, here's where I tapped in by mistake. It wasn't necessary. I ended up desoldering this wire and I took it off. But you do need one here, which will control this button. Then you slice the PCB here to connect the second wire to go to the last button. And then of course you have all your nice wires. Everything looking all pretty. And you see, it starts to get a little bit of a rat's nest. It's kind of hard to avoid. All these wires going across. Now this is something I did. I probably didn't have to do it this way. There's an amplifier, a little 3-watt amplifier that I put in here, and it required 5 volts. So I had no problem. I just soldered onto here. I used a quick connect. But you could have soldered this just as easily onto the display board on the bottom. This way, when you take the Pi out, you don't have to worry about this. It was just the way I did it. And if I do put a Raspberry Pi 4 in here, I'll probably end up soldering this to the display's 5 volts and put nothing on that machine, so I can always take it in and out. And here's my audio going here to a little phono plug that I took off an old headset. I just cut the cord out and took the connector out and soldered my stereo leads over to the speaker. I basically tied the left and right channels together to go to a single speaker that's in the machine. You could always, I guess, hack it to 2 speakers if you wanted to, but I chose not to do it that way. So again, it's just really just testing here. Now this here, you can see this is a photograph of the GPIO pins, and you know, I have this in my actual original BasicFun video, so you can always go over there and take a look at that. I use that pretty much for all of my builds, so you can see which pins will go to your joystick or buttons that are available. If you need to use sound, it's already on there. I'm not going to include it into this video. I'll put a link down below to the other build videos that I've done. You can see here's a daughter board with the power switch and the other switch that'll be my coin door. You can see in here I do have my reset button in here, or my safe shutdown button. Put in the back here, everything's already cut. The joystick is here, and just basically it's on the screen. You can't see the screen here. I'm just doing a test to make sure everything is working. The controls here are working, safe shutdown's working, the coin is working, and everything was not working originally, because the one mistake I make, and I do it every time, even though these are numbered 1 through 40, the GPIO pins are not numbered 1 through 40. They're different. So sometimes in the software I'll put in GPIO pin 40 or 38, but it's really 27 and 22. So it doesn't work. So it's just, you got to go back and you go, what's going on? And you fix it. It's not too big a deal. Those are easy problems to fix. Sometimes a soldering job could be more of an issue, but I've done some of these now and I kind of know already where the problems are going to lie. So you can see here, just put the small daughter board back in. This here is the buttons going over for my coin insertion, and this is just going to be spliced into my power switch, so my external 5 volts, so I can turn it on and off. And I'm just about to put the control board into its location right here now. You can see here these were cut. I had to cut them to put the display in. So the lower ones will fit just fine here and screw in, that'll hold it in place. The top ones was just using hot glue. A little hot glue will keep the control board in place just fine. So you can see right now I'm putting in the display. Try and make sure it's level. As you can see in the gameplay later, it's a little off because of this connector here, made it a little bit off. I should have probably cut this one off. But let's go back here. See, there's some hot glue I put on here, 1, 2, 3, you know, a couple of drops of hot glue. You used to heat them up again and take it off, but for right now it's fine. So once you get that where you want it to be, just put the hot glue on here, and then you can mount your Raspberry Pi right into these GPIO pin holders here, the headers, and then you plug in your HDMI right there, and that should hold it in place. You can see that the controllers here is in place. You can see one screw here holding it down, and then there's the other screw holding it down. And where the other screws are up here, just a little dab of hot glue is more than adequate to keep the controller in place. And just another shot, you can see the drops of hot glue. I probably used way too much. You don't really need that much, but when you have hot glue, you get hot glue happy and you start putting a lot of it down. And you can see everything's starting to fall into place pretty good. So basically now just line this guy up and this guy up to the gaps here in the Pi, and then connect your HDMI connector, and that's going to hold your Raspberry Pi in place just fine. You can see this locks in the lower part, this holds in the upper part, and then of course when you close the case, this will be butting up against it anyway, so it'll hold it in place just fine. The micro SD card slot is all lined up here. And just make sure your wires, just push them back. There's tons of room in here. When I've worked in the Super Impulse Tiny Arcade and shoved a Pi Zero, an amp, a battery, a screen, SD card, everything in there. So to me, this is basically, a football stadium's worth of space. So I still have to get a power supply, battery, and a charging circuit. There's tons of room in here, and it'll be easy to add after the fact. And you can see right here, it's actually worked out. It's even mostly in the black part, but you take your time. You just file it, and check, file it and check. A lot of filing, a lot of checking. You don't want to go too far. You can always take away. You can't put back, which is not really true. You can put back, but it's a lot more than sanding. You're probably going to ruin the label. So just take your time filing it. It will take time. It took me probably an hour to get this just right, but the end result, as you can see, is well worth it. And then when you first power it on, the way I put it in, the screen has to be upside down because I want all the connectors facing down. But there's a little software command you put in here, again, it's in my other videos, that will let you flip the screen, which is not a problem. So you test all your controls at this point, just make sure everything is working fine. Then you can start putting the speaker and everything else back in place. And then you can see, just put the little software command in, and the screen is now facing the right way. And this SD card image was by my buddy, 8-Bit Flashback. He does some good stuff, so do check out 8-Bit Flashback's channel. He does some good stuff and some good reviews. Now when it's time to put in the external power, I've always put it in these spots, and it's just so perfect. You can see right here, the actual loop actually locks it in place. So a little hot glue will hold this in just fine. And you can see here's my soft shutdown button with some hot glue on it. And then you can see here's the lip that the Pi will sit on. So this whole space is very, very tight, but down here you'll have tons of room on the bottom and on the sides. But this just works out so well for putting in the micro USB jack. See how nice that looks in there. It just comes out really, really good. And then here's my soft shutdown button and the spot where I'll eventually put my... I'm actually thinking I'm going to put another hole in here for a external USB. Why not? I was just rushing to get this one done. It only took me a couple hours to do this project. And then I have my amp volume control over here. You can see how perfect that sits right in there. It actually, there's a little lip down here. It kind of folds in and clicks in. It's just perfect. I'm so happy how that turns out. You can see a little hot glue holds that in place, and you have your wires going over to a micro USB jack that I have right here. And all these little things here I got off of either Amazon or eBay. They're easy to find. Micro USB, male, female, with test connectors on them, so you got to search for, and you'll find tons of them. I got like a bag of 20 of these for like $2, so it's really not expensive at all. And you can see here's my little amplifier. I got this also from eBay. It's called a PAM with a slider or a volume knob, and that cost me like 99 cents a piece. So I put that in place here. Soft reset button, power supply down here, and you can see I basically made all these removable. I can always disconnect and reconnect these wires, no problem. And then my speakers going up into the speaker area here, down to my amp, then it goes here into the headphone jack over here. And that's really it. Now it's really just putting everything in place, but again, there's so much room in here. Up here, no. Up here you're getting kind of tight, but down here there's plenty of room to put a battery and anything else you want to put down there. So you can see here's all the wires again. HDMI header up here. I got my power micro USB going down here. I have my one solder. I had two here. I had a ground, but the volume is already grounded, so I took it off. Just have one hot lead going here to go to my amp. Your daughter board down here, and everything I do with a soft connect on here. And again, you see there's no hot glue on the Pi. Pull this one thing off, pull this off, and the Pi can come right out. And you can place it with a Pi 4, which I'm probably going to end up doing. And the very last thing here on the bottom of the unit, it's so smooth it slides around. I just put on some little feet just to hold it in place. And that's really it. I mean, it's not a very difficult project. Once you build one of these, the same principles work with everything. So if you do want to know more detailed how to build this, I would say simply look down into my description and look at my other BasicFun builds that goes really in depth on everything I did here.
Okay, so here is the Glen's Retro Show Mortal Kombat. It's not turned on just yet. You can see looking at it from the front, you really can't see that there's been anything changed on here. Now the screen itself, I think it's about a 2.5 inch opening right here. Now the screen I have in here is actually a 3.5 inch HDMI screen. So the screen actually fills this whole void here. I thought about removing all the side artwork and cutting all this out, make the screen full size. A lot of the games I'm going to be playing on here are going to be a 4.3 aspect ratio, not widescreen. So losing that extra real estate really didn't bother me. And again, it wouldn't look stock if I removed both these sides and the two tops over here, so I left that alone. All the buttons are using the stock mechanics on here. The only things that changed are we do have the power button here, which will turn the power on and off. The volume control here is now my coins, so you press that to insert your coins, and that's your one player begin. And then the buttons and the joystick, obviously your buttons and joysticks, and they'll depend on the game. As you go towards the sides of the unit, on this side you see there's no difference. You just see the Scorpion artwork on here and the Mortal Kombat logo. But if you look really, really close, I'll get a shot of it more later, I had to cut a small hole right here, and that's where the SD card slot is. Let's see if I could zoom in a little bit here. Maybe you guys can see it a little bit better. Let me try zooming in. I'll try and get it in the camera angle. Right here. So just a very careful of cutting a hole so I can still access the micro SD card slot. Now in the other builds I have done, I have used like an SD card extender to put the SD card where I want it. A lot of times I'll put the SD card on the other BasicFuns on the back over here somewhere. But the Pi 3 is basically the whole width of this right here. So there's no way to easily do that. So on this one, the SD card slot's on the side. Now if you do look at the back, you can see this is where the reset button would have been on the machine. I put my own little switch in there, and that is basically the soft or safe shutdown. So when your machine, your Raspberry Pi 3 is on, you press this button right here, it'll do a safe shutdown. And when I snuck in right here is the micro USB adapter for power. Now currently I didn't have a charging circuit that could be used in here. There's plenty of room in here. So right now this only does run on an external power pack. But I will be putting in a charging circuit, so you can either run an external power or run on internal batteries. Now what I'm going to do right here, you see there's nothing else on the back. We just have my little reset button and the micro USB charger. But right now, under here, I normally would put, again, in other BasicFuns, I would put like a micro USB hub and stuff like that. But I didn't do it in this case. The Pi 3 already has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi built in. So everything I have right in here is I did trim out the battery compartment. And I have here my volume control for the game. I can rotate it to turn off the volume completely or turn it up. You can also do it from within the Raspberry Pi menu. But I always liked having a physical way of doing it if I needed to. But again, from the back of the unit, you wouldn't know really, unless you really looked hard, that this was not an actual BasicFun unit. As we go around to the other side, everything here is at completely stock. Nothing has been changed on this side. So without further ado, I'm going to connect this to external power, and we're going to power this little guy on, and we'll take a look at how it plays. Okay, so I have a old cell phone charger here. It's probably not even the right amount of amps. Actually, I know it's not the right amount of amps for a Raspberry Pi 3. So you might see a lightning bolt in the upper corner saying it's being undervolted a little bit. But just what I had lying around. Again, I wasn't really planning on doing this build, but I really just disliked the sound enough where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to play this thing at all the way it is. So if you turn it back to the back here, you can see there is the micro USB jack right here. Again, there will be a battery in here eventually, so you just use it for charge or whatever. But for right now, it is going to require this being plugged in to play it all. You can see it fits in really nice right there. It's just a perfect, absolute perfect fit there. I love it. And we just jack this thing into some AC on this side down here. We'll go back to the front of the unit. And like I said, we have our volume And we have our power button. So I'm going to hit the power button now. And you can see how to put the screen upside down, but in the RetroPie you can flip the screen, which you'll see it's going the right way. HDMI is upside down. And you can see it's off the screen a little bit, but the rest of it's not, so that's fine. And it goes right into Emulationstation. Of course, there's different builds, different ways of doing it. The only thing you really need to do, actually two things. One is, I do use the ETA Prime GPIO pin number 5 safe shutdown. So that little black button in the back, you press that, it'll shut it down and bring it up. I'll show you right now real quick. I'm gonna press this little button right back here on the back. This little guy right here. So when I press it, it'll do a safe shutdown, so you don't chance of damaging anything. So here we go, 1, 2, 3. And just give it a few extra seconds, even though the screen goes black like that, or blue I should say. Still a couple of things it's got to finish up. Just count like to 5, and you can either hit this button right here to turn it off, or you can hit the button on the back again, and it should restart it. When you're ready to turn it back on, just hit the button in the back a second time. You can see it comes right back up. Now this particular ROM image I have here is actually by 8-Bit Flashback, a friend of mine on YouTube. Do check out his channel. Now some small tweaks. When I put the screen in, you can see it's a little bit off. It's easy to fix. It's just hot glued in. So it's an easy adjustment to make that change. But again, this is something, normally I spend a couple of days or even weeks, like my Super Impulse Tiny Arcade, which was tiny, took me about a month to get the thing to fit. This thing I only did in a couple hours because there's plenty of room on here. It's pretty easy to mod inside here. And you can see right now we have lots of different things on here. We have arcade games on here, we have Super Nintendo, we have Sega CD, 32X, of course RetroPie itself, PC Engine, TurboGrafx 16, regular Nintendo, Neo Geo, Genesis, Mega Drive, Master System, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, the disk system for the Famicom, the Atari Lynx, 2600 games, and back to arcade. And right now, again, this is my coins, that's my Play 1 start, 6 buttons of use, and of course a joystick. Now, of course, these are not going to be, you know, high quality buttons. They work, but a couple of times I've seen this joystick, when I make a selection of a game, will stick either up or going down. But you know, you can't expect too much, but it's definitely, I think, better than it was stock. So let's go into arcade here. Another thing I need to do, which I haven't done yet, is change the font, because obviously they're very, very tiny. And also I could change this screen to be more of a 4.3 versus the widescreen that's in. You can see it is off part of the screen. These are all things that can be adjusted in either RetroArch or in Emulationstation itself. So we'll see if we can find some games here. I'm going to go down to a classic game, so let me go down to it. Okay, let's give this game a try. A classic good old Pac-Man. If you can hold the machine, get a good handle on the joystick, it works well enough. Pac-Man's definitely a good judge on how well the joystick's going to work. And again, it's adequate, but you have to be definitely precise and woo! Make sure you're going in the right direction. I just didn't do right there. Okay, let's take a look at another game. Again, we'll press these 2 keys to get out. And let's try the other game. Okay, some people may find it sacrilegious, but we'll try a little Street Fighter 2 on this Mortal Kombat. Let's launch the game. Let's put some coins in. I have no experience with Street Fighter 2. That's why I don't play Street Fighter too much. Let's try a different game. Okay, this is the Mortal Kombat, but let's try Mortal Kombat 2, which you wouldn't have gotten on this from Basic Fun. So let's give that a try. You guys put in a coin. Volume is a little bit low. That's something I probably have to adjust in the emulator. And being that this game's notorious for being a little bit slow on the regular Pi 3, I'll probably end up upgrading this to a Pi 4 at some point. But you can see there's blood. Oh man, he just totally wiped the floor with me. Oh, that was horrible. I'll try one more time. Credit? Start? I can put another credit in? Oh, I definitely got to set up these controls. I have no punching. I've only got kicking and blocks. Let's try a different game. Oh, that was a slaughter on that. Let's try another classic here. Try to do it with my left hand. I'll try it like this. Let's see. Whoop. Definitely have to hold it like a joystick. Otherwise it doesn't go exactly where we want it to go. There we go. Again, not the best joystick, but I've definitely used worse. As long as you really concentrate on where you're going, it responds well enough. Oh, so close. This joystick probably could do better with better silicone pads. I don't think they spring back fast enough. There's definitely been some missed inputs. Ah, like that. Again, this Pac-Man would be a 4-way lock joystick, and this is obviously not. I'd be happy if I could finish one level. Oh! Oh, did I make it? I did. Let's try a different game. Mr. Do. Meant to go up. Now that joystick again. Alright, let's see what else we could try. I meant to jump. Joystick is definitely a little bit finicky. Alright, let's try some Donkey Kong Jr. action. Oh, there we go. I do have to hook up a keyboard just so I can press tab and set up. Oh, too early. Woo. So I can just set the controls to better button options. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Oh my god! Oh! Yeah, the joystick is definitely one that you have to really concentrate on. No, don't go down. Oh! Well, I'll definitely say the buttons are pretty good. I just got to change the layout, but the joystick is definitely on the, not the best side. Oh, oh! That's it for Junior. So, overall, it's not too bad. It still needs a little bit of work. I definitely have to reconfigure the controls here. To play the actual Mortal Kombat games, the regular Pi 3 is really a little bit underpowered, unless I can find some way to do some frame skipping or try and tweak out a little bit more performance out of it. I think it would be better if I put a Raspberry Pi 4 in here, which I would have had, just never shipped. They're kind of backlogged right now. But I can still play lots of other games, and even Mortal Kombat 2 is not too bad. The original Mortal Kombat is kind of slow. I could also try a different emulator. I'm not even sure which one it's defaulting to right now. Again, I just built it. I want to do a quick little video on this little guy. But overall, it's really not too bad. It's definitely better than it was before. I had taken the back off here just so I can adjust the volume again for that Mortal Kombat 2. But I also have to get this thing battery powered as well. Right now, it only runs on the AC. But I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. I do lots of other builds like this guy right here. And lots of other things. So I do appreciate some time you spent with me today to look at this video. And remember everyone, game on!
Glen at the Tiny Arcade fan page. Remember, don't admire people too much. They'll disappoint you.
Sit, Blue Blue, sit. Good dog.